Welcome to the Spectators Podcast. Here are your hosts, Corey and Jeff.
One.
Welcome, spectators, to episode 51 of the Spectators Podcast. My name is Jeff, and to my mic adjacent is Corey. Corey, how are you, my friend?
I am doing well. Had a nice restful weekend. Not so stressed about WWE right now, which is good. I hope you could say the same. Things have been looking up on the right side. Still some issues, but I mean, it's not as stressful and to the heart right now. So, yeah. How about you? How are you? How are things?
Good. Yeah. No. The product is. I think WWE is kind of hitting the what's the button? They're in neutral again. Like nothing kind of exciting's happening. Well,
Good way to put it.
Outside of the Bloodline story, nothing really is exciting is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got a really exciting PLE coming up, right? So I think that's kind of a natural thing to be excited for, especially it's in London. So that'll be really good. But before we get into the episode, please hit subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up and hit the little bell there so you can let you know when we are going to have a new episode. But I do really want to talk about something outside WWE for once to start off our show. We normally are WWE centric, but you and I do keep track of the AEW as well. And I want to discuss this question: can wrestling work on a Saturday? So for those who don't know, AEW Collision debuted on Saturday, CM Punk being the headliner. And it seems like it was quite a successful show. It was in Chicago, so that's to be expected. But the question is can wrestling actually survive on a Saturday? It's been quite some time that wrestling has been done on a weekly basis on a Saturday. You do have the WWE PLEs on Saturday. And then if you look at other sports, you've got college football on Saturday, you've got hockey on Saturday. There's probably basketball in there as well. So I think the question I'd like to ask is, AEW Collision, or do you think it can be feasible on a Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I tuned in to Collision on Saturday. First episode. It was a good taste of what's going to happen. I mean, CM Punk came back, right? Long-awaited return again. We kind of knew that was going to draw some attention being in Chicago and everything. But I mean, he came out strong, both physically and, on the mic. Called out the entire roster. And I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, outside MJF right now, the entire roster is a bit stale. There's not really many challengers down the road for MJF. CM Punk, I think, made a statement saying, I've got the bag here, I've got the championship in here, and no one really beat me for this, and whoever truly can beat me deserves to hold the championship. But until then, I'm technically holding on to it, and I'm not giving it back. I think it's going to create a really interesting dynamic for the brand. What I do possibly see is if we do see success in Collision, we will likely see some new belt changes. Maybe we'll see another world title. If, again, this is all going to deem on if this is a successful venture. But if it is, I mean, I don't see why we wouldn't have a TV champion or something a little higher than the TNT title. For me, you have an interesting roster here, because I think the plan is, CM Punk's going to kind of lead that roster. Of course, for the first episode, we did see a few familiar faces that we see on Dynamite, but I don't think we're going to see CM Punk on Dynamite. I don't think that's the plan. He will be a Collision guy. But we did see people like Wardlow. We did see FTR. We did see a few that we would normally see on Dynamite, and I think they just needed to fill the first show. But we have a new TNT champion, and I think there was a lot of purpose behind that. I think Tony's perspective was we don't want to see Wardlow on Collision all the time. Luchasaurus and Christian Cage aren't getting as much time on Dynamite, so why not put them on Collision? Great person on the mic, another powerhouse guy. Why not throw them on Collision? And I think now we have a new champion that's going to be on Collision for the time being. But I don't see why down the road they couldn't have some additional titles added and kind of have it like a brand split, just like WWE. I don't want them to rush into it, but I do see perhaps it could be an idea. But I mean, you got to look at it from this perspective. Going back to what you said initially, can it be successful on a Saturday? Can wrestling be successful on a Saturday? Yes and no. If WWE still did their pay-per-views on Sundays, I could easily see it being not a problem. But the nights that we have PLEs that are going to sit on Saturday, I don't think a lot of people are going to watch Collision. Unless you're avid AEW fans and you don't pay attention to WWE, then that's fine in that case. But I mean, what am I going to watch? Collision, or am I going to watch Money in the Bank? Honestly, I'm going to watch Money in the Bank because it's a big pay-per-view, right? However, the rest of the Saturdays in the month, I will tune into Collision, and it was a good first show. And we've talked about this for a long time. AEW does have good talent in their roster. Now it's time for them to actually show it off a little bit. And if they can make attractive matches and book properly, I mean, the world's their oyster. They really could do it. Because right now, what is it? With Rampage being recorded after Dynamite, it's not really doing anything. I haven't watched Rampage in probably like 8 months, to be honest. Not gonna lie.
It's a very insignificant show, which is it's unfortunate, right? But I think that's where I'm at, because I think when we get into September and we get into football season and college football season, right? Like, it's going to be really telling how that's going to look, right? Because TSN right now here in Canada doesn't have any really. They do have some rights for hockey, but they don't have all of the rights, right? So that's going to be helpful for Canadian viewers who like AEW. But college football is massive in the States, like absolutely huge. To my knowledge, most of the games are played during the day, but I could be wrong. People who watch college football can correct me. There's probably some evening games there, right? So but again, there is no wrestling content outside of PLEs. For 3 out of the 4 weeks of the month, right? So you do have a unique opportunity here to, I think, really catch those viewers who are looking for content, right? Especially because if you look at SmackDown right now, and you're a wrestling fan in general, we're not talking about our AEW versus WWE arguments. If you're a wrestling fan, right, like right now, on the weekends you only really have the independents, right? Like that you can go your local wrestling show, right? Whereas now you do have the option to watch a wrestling show on the weekend, right? So there is potential there for this to work. And I agree with you. It's all about the booking, right? Like, you can't treat it like Rampage. You have to treat it like a separate show. I know the next show right now is not selling very well. Maybe the success of this show will help with that. But of course, like you said, the idea is that they're pinning this show off of CM Punk. That he is the attraction for this show. And I think it'll also be really helpful for go-home shows, right? Because all their pay-per-views are on Sundays. So instead of doing a go-home show on a Wednesday, it's quite a huge gap. I mean, you have Raw on Monday and the Saturday PLE, but you have SmackDown on Friday. You can do a bit of selling for that show. But that'll help, right? That'll definitely help with their go-home shows and selling of a pay-per-view, right? Because I know the last one was a Double or Nothing, I believe. Like it didn't sell as well as they wanted to. So if you have a Saturday show already in Vegas or something like that, where you have much opportunity to really push your product, I think it'll really help. So we'll see. Like they do really have to be careful, right? Because Rampage, is not doing well, and to the point where it sounds like it might not even exist anymore. We'll see. Like, it's getting right around 200,000 people watching it on Friday. It's a pretty bad time slot. It's right after SmackDown, right? So, or in that area, right? And SmackDown is the better product right now for WWE. Raw's trying, but you got the bloodline. Yeah, so I'll be really curious to see how a Saturday show will work, especially for those diehard wrestling fans who don't necessarily watch other sports. But they will have to be careful because this can go the other way quick with college football, with hockey, right? And I think it'll also kind of limit where they can go, right, for their shows, right? Because once sports is going, the small arenas, they do go to hockey arenas quite a bit, especially in the summer. That'll be limited. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate some of those things.
Yeah, you brought up two really big takeaways for me. One is, they have an opportunity, I think, for the Canadian market, right? You talked about the Canadian market and how impactful it can be because, we don't have a ton of things going on other than the hockey, which, in TSN, they don't have a lot of rights to Saturday night games, things like that. So, for those who don't necessarily want to watch hockey on Saturdays or their teams are not playing, there's that market. And I think AEW seems to be marketing this really heavy to Canadians, and trying to start fresh with Canadian market because it's a new brand. It's a new show that they have, and now they're really pushing it in Canada because you look at the next few tour dates. They're in Toronto next week, or I guess this week and Saturday.
Forbidden Doors in Toronto.
Yeah, Forbidden Door. They've got
fantastic.
They've got that. They got Forbidden Door. They've got a couple of shows in Winnipeg. They've got a couple of shows in
Hamilton, I think.
Hamilton. They've got a couple shows in Saskatchewan, a couple shows in Edmonton, I think. Maybe Edmonton and Calgary. And I don't think they're making their way to Vancouver this time, but typically wrestling does not make its way out of here. But that being said, there's a lot of shows going on in Canada, and I think that's really telltale sign that they're trying to push a little bit more AEW in Canada, especially because it's something that I think WWE has always lacked a little bit. They've never really gotten heavy into the Canadian market. Yes, they have a lot of fans here, but they don't get into here for shows, live shows. And if they are live shows, they're just like small little live shows, Saturday night events, like that kind of thing. They're not big. And the last time we seen a pay-per-view in Canada was Elimination Chamber, and it was a huge success. So hopefully it pushes WWE as well to make their way into Canada. And I'm hoping that goes forward. The second thing you mentioned is the break between Wednesday and Sunday, and that is quite a big break. And if you think about it, you watch Raw on Monday. If you watch both shows, right? You watch Raw on Monday, you watch Wednesday Dynamite. You probably do or don't. Probably, I'm leaning on don't watch Rampage, and you watch Friday Night SmackDown. If you then wait Saturday and then Sunday, you're kind of drawn into what's going on in SmackDown. It's really easy to forget what's going on in AEW or mix the two, get confused. So now it's perfect because you have Friday and then you potentially have a pay-per-view for WWE on a Saturday. And then in this case, you have a Saturday show, a go-home show, and a live show on Sunday. A live pay-per-view on Sunday, which I think is going to do wonders for them. I do believe to make it a little bit better. Now you have a good situation for the wrestlers too. Saturday this week coming up, or they're going to be in Toronto, and then they're going to go into Forbidden Door in Toronto too. So it all makes sense. It's kind of going with the workings of what's going well in WWE with those. With those situations.
No, absolutely. So looking forward to seeing how that's going to shape and how that's hopefully going to better the wrestling world, right? And now you have 4 days a week you get to watch wrestling, right? And then of course you add on PLEs there, right? So for example, you could for next week you can do Monday Night Raw, you can do Wednesday Dynamite, you can do Friday Night SmackDown and Rampage if you choose. You can do Collision on Saturday. You can do Money in the Bank because it's at noon o'clock our time here on the West Coast, and then you could theoretically watch Collision if you'd like. That's a lot of wrestling if you want to take it in. So it's also good for wrestling fans. There's more content, and Collision was a good show. There was some good wrestling on the show, so that's good to see. But we'll switch back to WWE and our main wrestling chat here. I think it would be amiss if we don't discuss what they're calling the Bloodline Civil War. Now is booked for for Money in the Bank. So your thoughts on Friday Night SmackDown's final segment that happened?
Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert to anybody who hasn't seen, but I'm sure everybody knows at this point.
If you're on social media, you've seen it.
Jay Uso has turned on Roman Reigns, and it's something that's been a long time coming, and I almost still I wasn't surprised, and it was an interesting situation because WWE has given us some surprises over the year. This wasn't really one of them, like it just wasn't. It didn't have the same oomph that when Jimmy turned on him. It didn't have the same oomph that when Sammy turned on him. Just for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it was a long time coming, and it probably should have happened a little sooner with Jay. Just the way that things had gone with him, and how he was the one who kind of, didn't really like the way that things were going with Roman. But it's okay. Overall, it was good. He placed the kick. He placed the words, the promo. Everything was done really well on his part. So I'm happy that we're gonna see the crumble of the bloodline. Finally, I think they're hyping it up a little too much. The civil war of the bloodline. It's a little too much for me. I don't know. I think we talked about this on our last podcast, our last episode. I don't really see the end game yet for one, Roman Reigns. And two, I don't really see the end game for Solo and how they're going to
after
work him in
Money in the Bank. After Money in the Bank, it's going to be another. We're going to wait to see. Well, this one we're going to obviously wait to see who wins the match because there is logic for both sides to win that match, right? But obviously, it's going to be the aftermatch you really want to see, right? Because and that's what the Bloodline has been doing since Royal Rumble. It's I'd say since Survivor Series too. Actually, it's that aftermatch cinema, right? Like how they're telling that story, right? Minus Backlash, because Backlash was boring as hell. Just forget about that segment, right? Like, what is going to happen? I think that is going to really tell us the direction of what's next for the Bloodline. And some folks actually were wondering why you actually have Jay turn now and not save it for Money in the Bank, because it is a massive story, right? Because it's 3 years of Jay's torture. He finally turned on Roman. And my God, is Roman taking so many goddamn super kicks. I feel... How does he not have a concussion at this point? But he sold that double super kick pretty damn well. And it leads to some very interesting questions because Roman's manipulation it's over now, but between his cousins, right? Like, there's no way he's going to bring him back into the bloodline, right? Maybe he will. I don't know. But are we going to see a more ruthless Roman now, right? Like, is his motivation now changed to, okay, that's it, I don't have to be manipulative anymore, I'm just going to be ruthless, right? Because they sell him like that, but he just doesn't always go that way, right? Like, even at the beatdown of KO, right? Like, he was more, he was leading it. He wasn't really doing much, right? He was going to hit him with a chair, and then he was going to make Sammy do it because that's what he does, right? So that kind of stuff is over now. He has Solo in his pocket. He doesn't really need to do any more manipulation. Who knows? Maybe the Usos will try and get Solo away from Roman. He's not coming. He's not going to be at the next SmackDown. He'll be at the Go Home show next week for Money in the Bank. So that'll be interesting. That final promo if they do it. So yeah, that is the big question. Now we have this tag match confirmed. So it's going to tell an interesting story, and I will always say this, and I will say it till the day I die probably. This would have been far more fascinating without the titles, but whatever. So they made that choice, and now he's walking around with 3 king belts. Excuse my language. And I get it, I do, but it looks freaking stupid. Really. That'd be like Asuka walking around with the Raw Women's title. That'd be like Rhea walking around with the SmackDown Women's title. Like, those belts are retired. Like, it just looks stupid.
It's Roman's egotistical nature, right? That's why he has to carry these titles around.
What is it going to hit the Usos with all three of those belts at Money in the Bank?
Well, him, Solo, and Paul are all going to hit them with each.
I don't know.
With a belt.
Paul's so busy running away from everything. I don't think. I mean, maybe the Usos will grab the two older belts and smack Roman with them because he seems to be really good at doing that. So yeah, no, the segment itself was brilliant. I mean, we know Jay has kind of been one of the leading charges since the Sammy era, right? And it's good to see again, like I said, the reinvigoration of the bloodline, and I like how it's now within the family. You don't have to burn anybody else right now, like Drew McIntyre, and you know everyone was thinking Bobby Lashley. I was like, I don't want Bobby Lashley to go up against Roman right now. He's not going to lose the belts, so you burn him again, right? So fine, yeah, okay. Roman won't defend the belt probably till SummerSlam, right? So, which is kind of shocking if you think about it, but there's enough story there. I'll live with it. But yeah, I mean, if he didn't have the belts, this would be great. But he has the belts, and I will begrudgingly not accept it. But I'll bring it up less, I promise. But yeah, no. Again, I think it's going to now be around what they do with this story. It's obviously going to main event Money in the Bank, which will be really interesting. It's the third tag match that's going to main event a PLE.
Yeah.
So you can kind of tell Triple H is still a bit in charge because we obviously know Vince is not like tag team.
He doesn't like tag teams, so that does make sense.
So we'll see. I'm very curious how they're going to take this story moving forward.
You know what? I personally feel like there's just so much here. There's so much that they could work on. There's so much that they could still do. But we know WWE, we know Triple H, we know Vince, and we know this could go in a completely different direction than we would expect. And that can be a bad thing or a good thing. I have a couple of questions, a couple of scenario based questions here. Just get your perspective and the viewer's perspective too, because I'm curious of what you guys would think here. But first and foremost, if you have the Usos lose, right, and Roman and Solo continue their raid over WWE, what do you do with the Usos next? Because I don't think there's a viable option to have the Usos face Roman and Solo again.
If they lose, yeah.
If they lose. So what do you do there? That's the first question. The second question is, you could go two ways with Solo. You either have the Usos that could just kind of convince him to turn on Roman, or you almost have a situation where Roman leads another kind of beatdown of one of the brothers. And that, he tells Solo, you gotta attack your brothers, something, and then Solo just can't do it at heart. He just can't give in.
Or the hope is, and I'm dying for this, is that Rikishi shows up at some point.
I was thinking this could be the thing. This could be the case that Rikishi might just, come in and say enough is enough. You got to stop. These are your brothers, for God's sakes.
And then Roman spears Rikishi.
Yeah, spears Rikishi, and then that's where Solo's like, no, you can hit my brothers. You can hit me, you can hit my brothers, but you don't touch my father, right? I could see that being a thing. I could see that definitely being a thing. And I would assume then we would lead to Roman versus Solo, which would create an interesting dynamic, as we've seen over the last several weeks, that Roman has a scared side of Solo, right? He kind of is a little standoffish. He doesn't want to tick him off. Obviously he sees something in that. So, I mean, you have definitely different directions, but I also feel like, sure, if Usos do win, and the Usos do have a case to keep, going after Roman, maybe we would see Roman face one of them to defend the
Hopefully
title.
Jay.
I would think it would be Jay, but I almost feel like they could even go in the direction where Jimmy and Jay are facing Roman, and Jay turns on Jimmy and said, "You think I was really going to turn on Roman? You think I was really going to do this?" And then it factors in that, he is the next tribal chief. He is going to he is going to stick with Roman. He is going to be the right-hand guy. And this whole him super kicking Roman was it was played out for Roman. He knew this was going to happen. Then we have Jay, keep the bloodline alive for a little bit longer. Because if you do have the bloodline crumble, excuse me, and Roman loses, but, Solo takes the pin, and then Solo ends up going after Roman, and say Roman beats Solo or whatever, but the bloodline's gone, so no one's going to be there to protect Roman anymore.
Yeah, they'll have to change the booking, because you can't use the same logic anymore, right? There's no one to back up Roman, unless they add someone new, which
see at this point.
Yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, the history is there with the family, and now you've gotten Solo. I will admit, like, you've gotten Solo nicely into this storyline, right? When he came into Clash of the Castle, it's like, oh, how are they going to do this, right? Because, a lot of his NXT stuff was, like, his family left him behind, right?
Yeah.
And, he acknowledged Roman right away and has been his loyal servant, basically, since, right? But that is the question, is that, as everyone is painfully pointing out, this is following what Cody said to him pre-Mania, but everyone's forgetting that Cody said that the family would leave when he loses his titles.
Yes.
So that's his bloody titles. Okay,
Three of them.
I'll stop talking about it now. That Solo, would eventually leave Roman too, right? And, it's seeming that's the direction it's going, right? Because now Solo has to pick between his cousin or his brother. And you would think he'd pick his brothers at some point. Who knows? Maybe they're terrible brothers to him. He's finally getting his revenge for being the younger brother of the twins. But then, yeah, like, how do you book those matches? Because Roman has just historically, since I've been watching, I don't know how long this interference stuff has been going on. I think it's been for quite some time, because KO mentioned it to matches I haven't seen before.
Probably at least since 2021. So we're talking like a good 2 years of interference.
Right? So you will have to start booking the matches differently. So that'll be actually kind of refreshing if you think about it, right? Because you'll just see a different side of Roman, right? A Roman where he has to actually win the match by himself.
Face Roman.
Stop doing that.
No. Face Roman. Because how do you get betrayed? Get the crowd behind you because you've been betrayed, but you still want a character to go on, because I despite all this happening, I still don't think Roman's losing his titles this year.
Yeah, it has to be Mania, you think.
But if the bloodline crumbles, you would think, well, that's the end of Roman Reigns. Like, you'd think it's also the end of Roman's reign. It just makes sense, right? So if you're not
like
gonna
reign as like tribal chief,
as tribal chief, as title holder, as champion, as just this whole gimmick is gone, because it's all gone without the bloodline, right? So do you inevitably turn him face if you want him to keep holding this title reign?
But like, wouldn't the Usos and Solo then turn face if they're facing a gap against Roman, right?
Well,
because if
you would assume they're face now, right? You would assume that they're face
the
now.
Usos, yeah. The Usos would be. So then if Solo turns on Roman, like, that's another face turn, right? So what would be the actual motivation to turn Roman face? Because then the bloodline would just go back together, because they said before Jimmy got attacked that we'll do this together, like, but not fighting him, with respect, right? So I just don't know how you would play that kind of face turn and say, like, I was betrayed by my family. It's like, well, because that's like a delusional heel type promo, because
you have the best point, and you're leading to segue to my next point here. So that leads me to believe Roman's losing his titles, because where do you go?
But I just don't know. I don't think so.
Where do you go with it? If Solo turns on him, and the Usos turn on him, and there's nothing left of the bloodline, and Roman's not going to change his character, I just don't see, after 2 years of being in a situation where you're always getting bailed out, how do you now become a dominant champion? It just doesn't add up to me. How do you now... Okay, so if Seth Rollins is going to face you, how do you beat him? If Cody Rhodes is going to face you, how do you beat him? If Drew McIntyre is going to face you, and the only reason you beat Drew McIntyre was because you had somebody save your butt at the end of the day, how do you beat him? So inevitably, it makes sense that Roman would be the weaker link here. And you have too many talent that, have lost to Roman because of interference. So without that interference, what happens?
It's almost like you should. Okay, I said I was going to stop bringing it up. But they booked themselves into a corner.
That's what I was going to say.
They've been doing this a lot lately, right? Like they did it with the Lesnar match at Night of Champions. They're doing it with Dom and Cody, right? Like they're booking themselves into an uncomfortable corner here, right?
We all know Brock Lesnar's coming out and smashing Cody, and Dom is winning this match. We know that's going to be the case.
That's not a great look.
It's not a good look. Well, Lesnar released his July schedule.
July 3rd is the first one.
And July 3rd is his first one, which would be the day
Raw.
After, the Raw after
Money in the
Bank, right? So
yeah, he could easily attack him, which it seems like that's what's going to happen, right? When again, not a fantastic look. Yes, like Dom doesn't legitimately beat Cody because Cody probably got like 16 F5s before he, maybe he does kick out, or I don't know. I just don't know how you're going to book that where it'll make Cody look okay, because you just can't, like Dom in the 6-man tag, like he didn't even face Cody, which I like that concept. But he's running away all the time, so like that doesn't look good.
I also don't want to see Brock and Cody again. I'm already bored of it. Like I don't want to have to see this again.
Although if it's that bull rope match, that'd be kind of interesting.
That would be interesting.
Gets rid of that stupid cast. Like it just like really fine. It's been like a month. Fine, he's healed. Like take the bloody cast off. And like no one believes your arm is broken.
So like, then what? So then what? He faces Brock, and then Brock actually breaks it this time, and what are you gonna do?
Because that is a good question. What do you do with Cody after this Brock feud?
What do you do with him? Because you don't slate him into the heavyweight championship because it doesn't make sense.
Which is shocking if you think about it.
And then you don't slate him into Roman because Roman's probably never going to defend his title for the rest of this year. And then, like, come on, like Roman's going to face Solo probably in a non-title match, and then he's going to face like nobody else in Survivor Series, or it's going to be like a non-title match between him and Seth. It's going to be something stupid.
Yeah, because like you've got Payback in September, then October's Extreme Rules, and then you have Survivor Series, Royal Rumble.
Good point there. To acknowledge the fact that we have a September pay-per-view. We haven't had a September pay-per-view in quite some time, so we got WWE
Clash of the
Payback
Castle was
in.
last year. Clash of the Castle was September last year.
It was September. It wasn't August.
My first PLE. August was SummerSlam.
Oh, you're right. It was September. Yeah. Okay.
So, which is interesting. Someone brought up a really interesting point about that, though, is Payback. Is this last time there was a Payback? That's when Roman won the Universal Championship off of Braun Strowman, I believe.
It was.
Yeah.
Because Roman came back at SummerSlam to kind of make a statement that he's returning and going to take the title from Braun and Fiend, whatever. He speared both of them. And then, he won it. He won it Payback. So I wonder if that's where he loses then.
That's what I was thinking, because that's an interesting pay-per-view to bring back.
Okay.
And especially in that time era. And so could Cody face Roman there, but how do you justify it? Because they're on different brands.
You can't. Otherwise, this brand split is a crock.
Mind you, LA Knight was on Raw tonight, so...
Well, I don't even know who you justify facing Roman next. Outside of like the Usos and Solo, where do you have Roman go right now? Like, if in your honest opinion, what direction would you go with Roman? Like, what would you do? I feel like they backed themselves into a corner here.
Yeah, and when Roman won at WrestleMania, they booked themselves into a corner, right? And it's like literally, and I agree with the analysis. I believe it was Denise Salcedo who first brought it up, that like you've actually tarnished his reign because of how you're doing this, right? Like the story with the Bloodline's fantastic, but it's like, Seth's doing open challenges. He's going to NXT to fight to do his his open challenges and stuff, right? Like he's the working champion, right? Because Roman's not that, right? So like WWE is really showing like how kind of farce this is by their actions, right? Like, so this is the problem when you make that kind of decision, right? Like, or a business decision, right? That's like adding Logan Paul into Money in the Bank, right? Like
We'll
everybody
get
else
to
had to
that in a
qualify,
second.
but he walks into Raw and says, "I want in," and he gets in, right? And that's a business decision. If he wins the briefcase, that'll be fascinating, because that will, I think, really divide the IWC on the people who are okay with like Logan and the idea of it, and then of course I think some hardcore wrestling fans would not be such a fan of that, right? Because you got a guy like Bronson Reed who I thought would probably be very good in a ladder match, but he's not, right? So, but Logan walks in basically and gets the non-existent seventh spot that he just magically created.
Well, the biggest thing is Cody's not in this Money in the Bank match. That's the biggest downfall right now. You don't have this guy who could be in the Money in the Bank and could hold that briefcase over either champion's head for a long time, because you have a year.
Be Roman for sure,
of course, but you have a year to make that decision, right?
And he's probably going to win it last year, do you think, right? Because before he tore his titty.
I think he would have. So, I hate to say it, but with WWE putting in Logan Paul last minute, it makes me feel like they might do it.
Put it on him.
They might give him the briefcase, because like, it adds up. They want to put a title on him, but it's not. But a lot of people fight the fact that he is not deserving of a title. So what better way to have him win than put the Money on the Bank on him and have him cash in when Seth is down, right? And then he's had a feud with Seth in the past.
You could do it in London too if you really want to.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. You have this match between him and Seth and Finn go all the way. Finn gets so close to winning and beats Seth to that last pin, and then Seth somehow is able to pin him and retain the title, and then Logan comes out and cashes in. And I think it makes the most sense for if you're gonna have him in the Money in the Bank, because why not throw the Money in the Bank on him? It gives a valid reason for him to cash in and not really win a title legitimately. And then, he'll lose to somebody real quick, because he's not a part-timer, right? So he'll lose real quick.
If Drew returns, then you could easily just have Drew destroy him at SummerSlam.
and could you imagine now if after all that happens, and Logan Paul goes in and wins and defends his title at SummerSlam, it's Cody. Could you imagine that? That would irritate me so much if that were actually the case.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just so far-fetched and so just ridiculous. But then again, I almost feel like if Cody waiting all the way till WrestleMania and Cody being involved with Roman just also seems so far-fetched at this point. Like
it really does.
They've driven themselves so far away from Cody and Roman's story that Roman would even probably laugh at him on the mic and said, "You didn't beat me last year. Why do you think I deserve to give you another chance? Or why do you think you deserve to give another chance?"
I think Roman's a little scared of Cody if you think about it, because he kind of avoided him at Raw after Mania, right? And if you think about it, if they're on the same brand, and let's just say he beats Solo at SummerSlam, right? But the bloodline's truly over. They're not behind him anymore. Cody's like, okay, give him my rematch. You got no one to back you up anymore. It's going to be legitimately me versus you at Payback, which makes sense. It's Payback, right? But they're not the same brand, so they can't justify it. So, yeah.
Unless they make a trade somehow. Unless they do.
Could doctor a trade, yeah.
Consider maybe the Usos or Solo getting traded to Raw for Cody to get traded to SmackDown.
They could garner that, because maybe they want to screw over Roman, because they know Cody can beat him, right? He hasn't been pinned since Roman. He's only been pinned by Roman. Is that it?
When
he came back, he beat Seth 3 times.
Yeah, he's only been pinned by Roman.
That's it.
He didn't even submit to
He passed out.
Lesnar. He passed out, so it doesn't count.
So yeah, so like once this Lesnar Cody thing's done, I have no idea what they're going to do with Cody, right? And you'd think he'd be in some kind of title picture, right? But
you'd think, yeah,
because you know, if they want to legitimize this World Heavyweight Championship, you got to think you'd bet it on Cody. But I don't think the fans would like that because they want him to have Roman's title, right? So yeah, I think they've definitely booked themselves into a corner, and I'm not really sure what they are going to do. I do want to finish off. So we talked about Logan and all that, but I do want to finish off circling back to the title of our last episode, which is WWE's disrespectful direction, and it was kind of further proved this Raw with Rhea just simply squashing Natalya. It does nothing for Rhea. It does zero for Natalya. And we have a bit of a not even close to a clear picture of a challenger for Rhea. Maybe Raquel Rodriguez. Actually, they went face to face, but just a really disappointing night for the championship, right? Like, you know, Rhea was involved in the main event. That was cool. But yeah, it's disheartening to see that they're just still not really wanting to put up a legitimate contender for Rhea. Like, you know, on Asuka's side, you know, you do have Charlotte and Bianca, potentially Io in there, so that's a bit of a better picture. We'll see what they do there, because there's rumor that Io is actually in line to beat Asuka, and I will definitely eat some humble pie if that's the case, because that's not disrespectful. That's a really cool match if they do that. But yeah, no, I was just a little annoyed that when I saw they announced the match, I was like, what are they doing? Like, she squashed her. Like, there was nothing. Maybe there's some sort of down on her luck kind of storyline for Natalya. I don't know. But like, that match didn't do anything for Rhea or Natalya. And it didn't do anything for the Women's World Championship, which has been newly debuted, and it does not feel like it's significant at all at this point.
I agree. And it brings me to my next point. Significance.
Mm.
How do you think the draft of the NXT talent has been going?
Well, there's a unification match that's on SmackDown, which they're probably gonna lose because they want to give Ronda everything. Yeah, not very good, eh? Like, I can't really think. I guess Zoe Stark is one exception. She's in a good storyline, right? She's hanging out with Trish and, you know, involved with Becky. That's good. The tag scene, Katana Chance
and
Caden Carr. I'm going to throw the names up.
Yeah.
They actually have had two good matches on TV,
and they won tonight.
Yeah, and they put on a pretty damn good match against Ronda and Shayna.
Yeah.
So like, they're able to show their talent. Isla Dawn and Alba Fry, this will be their first match on TV. I don't think I've seen them. I haven't seen them fight yet. It's a shame that's a unification match. That's their first match. Would love to see them win. Like, if Ronda and Shayna really do truly want to push this women's division forward, you give those two the belt, not them, right? And I know Ronda wants to be tag champ, right? And you probably want her to lose at a PLE and not on TV, right? And who knows? Maybe like there's some sort of cheating involved, and there'll be a rematch at Money in the Bank. It's like, you know, Alba Dawn and I think I'm screwing the names up, but they're Scottish, so they usually, you know, that's close enough to home for WWE. Mm-hmm. So they'd want them probably at the event somehow, right? Maybe a triple threat, that'd be kind of cool. But outside of that, I'm trying to think who for NXT. Cameron Grimes has been okay.
Cameron Grimes had a couple filler matches, but it was against Baron Corbin, so it's like,
who's now on NXT facing Carmella.
Yep. And then my biggest thing is this whole Grayson Waller.
Right.
I was looking forward to seeing him on the roster and actually get into action, and all they've done is put him on the Grayson Waller effect 3 weeks in a row.
He's the SmackDown's Miz, is what they're calling him.
Unfortunately.
Which is pretty accurate, right? So yeah, it's been it's been okay.
Speaking of Miz, Thomas Ciampa came back today.
That was cool. The rumor is they want to reunite DIY from NXT. It was him and Johnny Gargano, Ciampa and Johnny Gargano.
That's right.
And their hope is that they'll do it for SummerSlam against Sammy and KO, which would be cool. But like, it's just interesting with speaking of that, like how they called up Indy Hartwell and reunite the Way, but like they literally had one segment since the draft and have not seen Candice LeRae once since then.
We haven't even seen Dexter Lumis do anything. Nothing.
Dexter or Indy for that matter. She relinquished the NXT title for Cripe's sake, right? Like, and Tiffany Stratton's champ now, so that's I think that's deserving. But like, you had to relinquish her championship just to not do anything. Like, I mean, I guess you're getting paid, so that's always good. It's kind of like the OC, like the Good Brothers aren't doing really much. Like, it's just there's some kind of weird little blind spots that are happening with some talent right now. Because we're seeing AJ and Michin like have some good matches, right? They for some reason they fought Karrion Kross again, and Kross actually won this time. But yeah, like overall the NXT call-ups haven't been great. Actually, some talent has gone back to NXT. Like Mustafa Ali is doing stuff. Baron Corbin, obviously. Another tag team went down too, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, it's been meh. Like I don't think it's given the the recharge that we were kind of all hoping for, right? Like there's a bunch of people I don't like the free eight, like Von Wagner, haven't seen him. The Xylon Quinn, I think is another name that we haven't really seen. And yeah, again, like Indy's not doing anything. And like really the only one that's really kind of benefited from it is, I would say, probably the two tag teams, which is good. Like we don't have a lot of women's tag teams in general.
Yeah.
But what do they do after, like, Food is now like Advantage? I can't remember the Raw tag team. I can't remember their names. Who do they face now, right? Like, and then if Alba and Isla lose, who do they face, or who does Ronda and Shayna face if they just end up beating them, which I think they will. So it's not been the greatest, but interesting though. You're seeing it now that Nick Khan has said on publicly that they're actually trying to shift NXT to be a third brand and not a development brand. Hence why you're kind of seeing Seth Rollins go to NXT. Baron Corbin, which actually is a good feud. I do actually like it. It actually does make me want to watch NXT to kind of see that match. I mean, Baron Corbin's finally won a match, but it was on NXT.
Makes me wonder if they actually throw a title on him. Like if they actually have him win so that they can actually push his career forward.
Maybe. But the other rumor is they might have the NXT Women's Championship and the NXT Men's Championship actually defended at SummerSlam.
Oh.
To sort of push the brand up.
That would be interesting.
It would be, hey? I think, and I like it.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. I wouldn't be opposed to
that.
I
like it, right? Because SummerSlam's a massive show, right? Mm-hmm. It's just pushing your talent and pushing your third brand up, really, right? You get more exposure, right? I mean, really, it's challenging for NXT because they only ever do their shows at the Performance Center in Florida. So if someone wants to go see them, they have to fly to Florida, basically, right? Or watch the show. So, it's interesting. Like, I'm curious how this change in philosophy on NXT is going to affect like all of this. Like, if they do a draft next year, will NXT be a part of the draft, right? And you have a 1, 2, 3 situation where you see like a Seth Rollins actually going to NXT, but because it's not a development brand anymore, it's that third brand, right? Like almost kind of combating AEW, right? They've got 3 shows right now. So yeah, we'll be kind of curious to see the direction they take that for sure.
I think it's pretty clear at this point. We know who our next men's tag team champions are going to be. It's going to be Ender Sheer because Veer Mahan is Vince McMahon's pet project.
Well, it's funny. Like they're trying to do a show in India, and I actually thought they were going to do the September PLE in India. That was the rumor, but then it ended up being in Pittsburgh. So I think that at some point you're right. They're going to put some sort of belt on this faction, so that they can build that market up in India. one thing I want to touch on before we end the podcast is the rumor of the rights negotiations with WWE. I think it's turning out to be quite interesting. So WWE's what's they call it specific window where they can negotiate with Fox and I guess it would be NBC because it's USA Today the company has closed and a deal wasn't struck. So now there's rumor that Disney wants to get involved. Disney would like to actually buy the television rights of WWE, and it's not clear if they did do it. Where that would go? Would it be ESPN? Would Disney Plus just have it? Right, like they have the capacity to do live sports. But it's been rumored for a while that other places like Amazon as well and Netflix, are also interested in potentially taking the rights for WWE. AEW seems like it's pretty clear it's staying with Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going anywhere. But for WWE specifically, it seems like, both parties, even WWE themselves, are potentially looking at, maybe changing how they do things and turning it to a streaming service versus the cable television. So your thoughts on that? Because you've been watching cable wrestling for 25 years, and it might not be that as the rights deal come up. I think it's the beginning of 2024.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm open to anything at this point. I mean, I use these streaming services myself, whether it's Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever. And if it's something that's going to be added as like almost like a weekly episodic add to the streaming service where it's not really live necessarily, but you could watch it live, I don't know how that would work. But regardless, I think it gives more flexibility to its fans. However, it takes a little bit away from it if it isn't live on cable TV. Perhaps they could do something where it could be live on TV and on Disney or added to Disney after. I don't know. Maybe it's on like Disney Channel and then like live on Disney Channel and then like put onto the pay-per-view, the streaming service after. What I do like about that idea is could they do something archival? So if right now with WWE Network, like you can go back and you can watch old episodes of Raw and Smackdown. And when I say old episodes, I mean from like the 90s. So if you want to if you're really curious about Stone Cold Steve Austin's era and you're a younger person and you didn't really get the chance to see that, you could literally go back to that era and watch a bunch of episodes, watch some pay-per-views and things like that. They store everything on WWE Network. If that would be added to Disney, I think that would do really well for a lot of people being able to go back and check that out, see kind of the history of WWE. And I think as far as I understand, that still would make WWE money because they're still going back and looking at old material. So I think it would do good. I understand that Disney's the one who owns ESPN, right? They own ESPN, ESPN Plus. Unfortunately for us in Canada, we cannot get ESPN Plus here, I don't think. At least not
I don't know. Good question.
The Plus service. I think we can just get regular ESPN. Because I know UFC has a deal with ESPN Plus, if I know correctly. So that means Endeavor's already worked with them. So it would make sense for that to be the case. I don't know if I think the same about Netflix. I feel like Netflix is slowly kind of
was Amazon
dwindling.
Prime.
Amazon Prime's big too. Yeah.
But I think that is if it's those streaming services, I think WWE wants ESPN, right? Like that's a way larger audience than I think USA or maybe Fox too. Like it's doing very good numbers on Fox. And I don't think NBC wants to lose WWE by any measure. Like I think USA doesn't have a lot on their programming schedule, so Raw's a big thing.
Right, and Peacock is NBC as well, right? That's like where they
are. And that's a question: is if they move off of USA Today and they move off of Fox, and they are on a streaming service, would they just break the contract with Peacock and go on to an ESPN? Right. There's lots of questions there, right? Because the other wondering is because UFC does pay-per-views, will they move back to that model to maximize their profits? I I hope not. I like this idea of a subscription service because then you're just kind of get like, even if you don't watch WWE, like, like it's like gym memberships, you just kind of forget about it. Whereas like if you do a pay-per-view, like pay per view, and you charge $50 to $70, you're gonna lose a lot of people who can't afford that, right?
You're gonna lose a lot of people that you've gained over the last, I think, what did they start these PLE's streaming service, WWE Network, since like 2014. So all that time you've gained a lot of people who are like, yeah, I'm fine with paying WWE Network or whatever streaming service for several years. I don't know if I want to pay $70 every time a pay-per-view comes.
Well, because I don't know if it says in the podcast or just you and I, but like PLEs are what get you to watch the weekly show, right? So if you restrict the people, for example, we watch the PLEs together, right? If it was like, oh, it's like $70 each time, like we couldn't afford that, right? So we would be missing out on that. Or someone saying like, oh, hey, come to my house and watch WrestleMania, for example, right? And then that turns that person into a fan that goes, oh, I'm now going to get this service because I really like what I saw. Whereas like if it's $70 to $80 for night one and night two, it's $160, for example, right? Like someone's like, yeah, I can't afford that. So therefore they're not bringing new eyeballs to the product, right? Because you can make money with the merchandise, right? That's actually they're doing incredibly well with merchandise and of course ticket sales, right? Those are other ways you can make that money, right? So I hope they don't get greedy and go back to that model, because I think it'd be a bit of a big mistake for sure.
I almost agree and disagree with that, because you think that watching the PLEs, the pay-per-views, whatever, that's going to draw eyeballs. It probably does, but I feel like when I was a young child and I was watching WWE, and a lot of my friends who did at the time, we didn't watch all the pay-per-views because they were like $50, $60, $70. WrestleMania was like $100, they were really expensive, right? So you got to see the odd one. and for any of you younger people who are listening right now, I'll take you back nostalgically. We did watch Raw. SmackDown wasn't a thing yet. It wasn't even on TV until 1999. So we watched Raw every week, and I had no problem watching Raw and missing the pay-per-views because WWE has always done a really good job at recapping. Thank you for the word. Recapping the whole thing on the Monday Night Raw. So you never really felt like you missed out. And then a couple of weeks after the PLE was done, and this is where I'm going to bring in the nostalgia piece, I'd go over to, Blockbuster or Rogers Video in Canada, and I'd rent the videotape VHS of the pay-per-view, and I'd watch it on my VCR. If anyone doesn't know what a VCR is, it was something that you actually put a tape into and watched movies. Now, they did this for a long time, where they would tape these. You'd be able to buy them, and then you could actually buy them on DVD or rent them on DVD later. And that was the thing, and that's kind of how a lot of people had access to pay-per-views. And then they moved away from this, and they went into the subscription model so that people could, watch the pay-per-views in the subscription. I don't think at this point, obviously, pay-per-views are not going to be a thing to be watched later on a tape or whatever. But I could see something working where if you subscribed to Disney, let's say, for example, you could watch Raw either on cable or you could watch it afterwards on Disney, but you could watch the pay-per-views all on Disney. You just have to wait and not watch it live. So you just couldn't watch it live, and you could watch it afterwards. Now, but with social media these days, that would be difficult, right?
And to defeat the purpose of the PLE, in my opinion, right? It's supposed to be like the end of feuds or the beginning of stories, right? And if they move back to that model and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to catch it on Raw anyways, then what is the point of that PLE, right?
Nothing. Yeah.
Right. So I just they might do it. It might be successful. I don't know. I just feel like the subscription model is the model of the world, right? There's more streaming services now than there ever have been. So why mess with that formula? It's obviously working for WWE. They keep saying that the viewership for each of these things keeps going up and up and up. But WrestleMania was one of the most watched WrestleManias ever. Right. And And you can see from the ticket sales from WrestleMania, right? Like it's worked. Like the people are glued to the product now, right? And I think it's because of the success they built up for WrestleMania. And I think that would have been affected a little bit if it was a pay-per-view model.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes total sense.
Anyways, we'll stop there. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Please hit subscribe, give us a thumbs up, hit the little bell, let you know when we are putting an episode up. But as I always say, my beautifully beautiful friend, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Jeff. And we'll catch you in the next one.